All right, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jason Scoggins, who is COO for Slated.com. Slated is an equity investor platform. It's where filmmakers can post their projects and accredited investors can initiate the process of investing in those projects.
Thanks, everybody, and thank you, Nancy, for having me on. As you said earlier, Slated is a platform that matches filmmakers and their projects with film financiers. The idea behind the site was that raising money for independent film is a total pain. It takes forever. No deal is the same. Nobody knows exactly where they sit on the investor side in the waterfall. That nobody knows how they're going to sort of recoup their investment. And on the filmmaker side, it's often really opaque. The process of raising money itself, as well as how to interact with investors and meet lots and lots of investors. That was sort of the underpinnings of the site. Steph Paterno, our CEO, often talks about how when he was one of the founding members of a production company called Pawn Star, that the first several years were very difficult for any new company entering the entertainment business. Even if you have money to invest in films, it's difficult to have access to people. It's difficult to get access to projects. And the process of raising money, just like I said, takes forever and is incredibly painful. So in I think 2010, 2011, somewhere in there, he and the other founders of Slated were talking about ways to solve that problem. And the site was founded in 2012. And for the first several years, the sort of primary set of activities, or the primary thing that the site was designed to do, was to facilitate introductions between filmmakers and investors. From the beginning, filmmakers could sign up for free and list their projects for free, and all of the sort of messaging tools and the interactions between Slated members that was free, and all of that stuff that I just referred to, it still exists and is still free. About a year ago, we launched a couple of paid services, and we started to build a sort of more active film finance component to what Slated is, and that's what I've been focusing on for the last roughly 6 months.
That's very cool. So can you tell me how many filmmakers and how many investors you have as sort of an active population on the platform?
Sure. It's a producer-driven platform, both in terms of the projects that get listed. That's all driven by from the producer or the filmmaker side. We use the term filmmaker very broadly. Mostly that means the producers, but as well as anybody else involved in sort of pushing a project forward. In terms of our membership, we have, I think it's just under 40,000 now. I think about roughly 18,000 producers. Some of these stats are on the homepage of slated.com, so feel free to check that out. But roughly 18,000 producers. On the investor side, it's roughly 1,800. I think it might be closer to 1,850, something like that. All of our investors are accredited, which is a distinction that I'm sure we'll talk about a bit later. Of that 1,800, roughly 300-ish are what we sort of talk about internally as professional film investors, individual companies, individual people, as well as companies that are sophisticated about film finance, that have invested many times in films. That's how we think of that. And then the other 1,500 or so are individuals. Oh, by the way, that sort of upper end that I just talked about, they tend to write larger checks for their investments, mid-6 figures and up. The rest of the investor base is individual people. For the most part, these are high net worth individuals in any case, but the sort of less sophisticated investors tend to write smaller checks, below 6 figures as a group. And so that's sort of the makeup of the site. We've been developing the user base a lot over the last roughly year and a half. In mid-2014, the company pivoted a little bit in that prior to that, you had to be invited to join the site, and there were a lot of rules about how to list a project. Projects had to have a certain amount of financing in place. The teams had to be developed fairly well. Specifically, if it was a narrative feature, for example, it had to have both a director and a lead actor. All of those rules have been removed. And the mechanism that replaced it was the scoring system that Slated developed. It was a scoring system mostly oriented around people. So what Steph and the team did back then was to come up with a way to quantify the sort of the marketplace value of each person who's involved in a movie. And that's based on their lifetime box office as well as lifetime award nominations and wins. And so rather than have a sort of a velvet rope approach where people have to get invited into the site, that scoring system is used to provide a mechanism for more accomplished people with, for the easy example that we use all the time is if Steven Spielberg was on the site, there'd be a high likelihood that everybody on the site would want to talk to him. And so we use the scoring system as a mechanism to sort of basically right-size the sort of score of the people that can talk to people that are more accomplished than them. Whatever your score is, you can talk to people with scores that are larger than yours up to sort of a certain threshold. And if you're sort of like Steven Spielberg, you can talk to everybody who's below you based on whatever criteria you set for yourself.
One of the interesting changes I think you've made over the course of the last couple of years is you've made it so that Slated can actually be a place where serious people can go and post their project
no matter what stage, right?
In its early stages, and it can actually grow onto the platform. And in fact, people can use the platform to actually connect to people saying, look, this is my project. We're both on Slated, so we both know that it's a good platform to find team members and investors. And it means that I can look through, and if I can look through other people on the site and I can say, this is the director. He's already on Slated. I like his credits, and if he tracks me or he follows me, then I know, okay, this guy's interested in my project and I don't have a director. So
right.
That might be a good connection. So it provides an interesting place where you can groom a project from the bottom, from the very earliest days all the way up. But it is for very serious people who are actually moving their projects forward. But
exactly, and you get to use your real-world social network to network your way to those people who can help move your project forward. So if you're I'm not sure that you would actually want to post or create a project profile for a concept, but certainly you would want to create a project profile for yourself. And let's say you've got an idea for a cute little indie road movie, you might want to network your way to people who have affinity for that sort of thing and start talking about your project with people offline. And then as the project starts to develop, you would create a project profile at the appropriate time and start to let people see that. I can think of half a dozen different reasons you might list a project before you have a budget. Where, for example, you've got a first or second draft of your script. Our script analysis service that we launched last summer is a great way to get a sense of how strong that piece of material is. And so you can create a project profile and just not expose it. The privacy controls are another thing that got added to the site about a year and a half ago. So you could create a project profile, simply not share it with anybody besides the people who are on your team. And as you sort of add elements or push your project forward, whether it's hiring a line producer or somebody to put a budget together, at every step you can add you can sort of invite additional people to see it. And then once it's ready to be seen by investors, which I think is something we should talk about on this call, once it's ready, then you can make it available to the entire Slated investor community or the entire Slated membership at large, whatever makes sense for you strategically.
So that makes perfect sense. So let's actually talk about that. So one of the things that if I go onto the site, I create myself a profile, which is free. I get a feeling for the thing. I know that I want to produce a low budget horror story or a ghost story. I happen to have my the script. I do have a line producer on board. Maybe a director or somebody I think I'm might want to have as a director on board who's interested, shall we say. I can go ahead and I can post the project, and then one of the features I think is most interesting that you've added to the site is a set of analytical tools that allow people to get their project scored. And one of them is script coverage, where you hire I think it's 3 people, right? Your script coverage allows you to have 3 people cover the script, and they can rate it, as considered pass, etc. And they provide detailed notes. Each of them provides detailed notes. And then the second thing is that you do you have a film analytics package, which basically tells people, estimates how, based upon statistical analysis, how well films like the film someone has posted is how likely it is to do well in the marketplace. Basically, it says, well, other films that are like this one that have been released within a reasonable period of time that met the same set of criteria, they've made this amount of money in the box office. So if that forecast says, that estimated revenues are going to be $5 to $7 million and your budget is $30 million, that feedback lets you know that your film is you and investors know that your film is unlikely to be profitable because your project is so dramatically out of whack.
Yeah.
Upon how
would
much
it be helpful to show a sample project profile so people can sort of see what we're talking about?
I think that would be very helpful. So, but my point, so those two analytical tools on the site, which are very cost effective and to purchase, basically let people get a score that will make it so that if they have a high score, 1/70, for example, or 90, it will make it so that their project ranks higher for.
Exactly. Although I would hasten to sort of jump in and say that purchasing the script and financial analysis tools are not required at all. Okay. It is really just a way to sort of help people understand sort of those 4 key questions that everybody asks: who's in it, who's making it, how good is the material, and can it make money? So can you see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay. So I won't go super deep, or I'll go as deep as you'd like to, but just on that point, I wanted to sort of jump in and say that all of the do-it-yourself aspects of Slated that Slated started with are still there, and there's still, you can network your way to investors and to other potential partners for your project completely separately from the script score and financial score stuff that I'll be talking about in a moment. So what we're seeing here on the page is just a project profile for a project we were involved in last summer. Our launch partner for our film finance and scoring system was a company called AG Capital, and they ended up financing this movie called Cruise, which is by the writer-director Rob Siegel. And so I'll just use it as an example to sort of show the things that you can do even without the script and financial analysis. At the top of the page, I paused this at a terrible moment here. There we go, that's much better. Rob, this is basically a couple-minute video where the writer-director talks about his vision for the project. This was the key art. There's a log line here. These are the comps that were selected by the filmmakers, and there's a synopsis. And then this first tab down here, as you scroll down, lists all the people that were involved. I think once they got going, they didn't build out the entire cast or crew, but you can see that this movie stars Emily Ratajkowski and Spencer Boldman. Rob Siegel was the writer-director. Alex Garcia and Scott Lestady and Laura Walker were the producers. UTA was the agency who's handling domestic rights, etc.
Right.
All of that exists. And then way up at the top, you can use the tools that are provided by the platform to send updates to the people that are tracking the movie, new people that are new, that sort of recently signed up since your last update to track the film. You can share the same information on Facebook and on Twitter. You can send an email about this to a custom list. All of this is completely free and has nothing to do with the script and financial analysis stuff.
Right. So, but so actually, let's go back. If you could go back to the previous screen, that'd be cool. The one that actually the project page.
Sure, it's coming back up right now.
Cool. So on the project page, in addition to listing, so you list the poster, you list the video. When you go lower down, it mentions the team. You can also provide information about the script, the basic financials, as much as you feel comfortable disclosing, the opportunities in terms of people that you're looking for or financing, et cetera, that you're looking for. And then you can also provide, it'll have a list of the updates. Now I want to mention a couple of things to our listeners because many of them are not going to understand something that's pretty important. So you as a filmmaker are not allowed to go onto your website and provide this kind of information and then say that we're looking for investment. It's called, you're not allowed to solicit investment just anywhere on the internet because the SEC has a set of rules which limit the number of people that you're allowed to request funding from to investors that meet certain criteria, which are called accredited investors. So the interesting thing about posting your project on slated.com and providing all of this detail and saying that you're actively looking for investment is that's legal, because Slated is a registered equity investment platform. So it meets all the criteria required by the state of California and the U.S. government for making investment opportunities available to accredited investors. It also means that if you meet somebody and they're interested in investing in your project, you can actually say, well, I'm listed on Slated, and then people can go to the site, prove that they're an accredited investor, and then they'll have access to the information that you're showing them. But they're specified. You don't have to go through the process of saying, is this investor who's approaching me, is it okay for me to show him this? And is it okay for me to talk about my project? Because Slated is an equity investment platform. And if you share information on LinkedIn.com that points people back to Slated, or share stuff on Facebook saying, hey, I've just put my film's available on Slated, and we just, the funding platform for independent film, you can drive people back here to actually sign up and get access to your data.
Right. So let me jump in real quick and let me add and very clear that I am not a lawyer, and nothing I say on here should be construed as legal advice. On this thing about pointing people back to your Slated page from LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or what have you, when we were talking to our lawyers about pulling our financial documents together for the film finance side of Slated's business, we talked a lot about what marketing we could do and what we couldn't do. Basically, the line is sort of where you think it is. You're not allowed to say, hey, there's a great investment opportunity. Click here. That kind of thing is completely not okay. But pointing people to say, check out my awesome project on Slated is fine.
Right.
Again, not a lawyer, but that kind of thing, that kind of communication isn't sort of a solicitation for people to invest in your film. You're basically pointing people to look at the project profile for your project. Right.
In other words, you're not allowed to say this is a great investment. You are allowed to tell people that your film is listed on Slated, which is the equity investment platform. Anyway, the most important thing is that for a lot of people, it is a safe way for you to get access to Slated's investors, and it's through the site, and then also to bring new investors to the platform, which is something that to a platform where it is safe for them to actually look at investment opportunities, because that's what the site was actually designed for. So let's just take a moment to talk about your script analysis, because there's a million script analysis things, and there's other film analytics. There's a company called Film Analytics, and I just did an interview with the guy from the numbers. So there's other people that do both of those two kinds of services. So just to review, your script analysis coverage at the moment, can you tell me how much it actually costs to get script analysis that feeds into your current scoring system on slated.com?
Sure. It's $495.
Right.
And then the financial analysis is $995. But if you buy them both together, it's $995 for both. So it's like getting script analysis for free.
And the scores that are, and if, let's say, for example, that I come to you and I go ahead and I feed you my script, and the coverage that I get is bad because the script is bad. So, which is I actually think people don't understand the point of coverage. The point of coverage is because your script is bad and you can actually fix it, because it actually tells you what's wrong with it. So let's say that I fix it and then I resubmit it to you to get rescored, and I can get a higher score if I submit it to you again. And I mentioned
assuming that you fix the problems, and when you resubmit, it would be another fee. We're paying 3 readers and a supervisor to read and write very detailed coverage, which I'll show you in a moment. And then a supervisor who is sort of making sure that all of these scores that are sort of here on the screen are mapped to to all the comments that they're doing. So we have to pay the readers to do that every time. So when you submit a new draft, you have to pay another $495 for that. But once you pay for the financial analysis, and I'll show you in a moment, you can rerun your financial analysis as often as you'd like. And there's tools that'll let you do that on the site automatically.
Right. And I mentioned in passing, I actually, I'm a writer producer, so I actually purchase coverage pretty routinely. And I've been using WeScreenplay recently because, they have a whole bunch of readers and I just use them regularly. But the interesting thing is that over time, it's the fastest way I've found to be able to get meaningful notes from my screenplay. There's the skills required for the notes that a reader gives you, because they analyze scripts all day, every day, are different from the notes that you get from, are the notes that you, different notes than you get from just your family or your friends or even other filmmakers, I think. So,
yeah, well, for sure. And just to sort of describe what we're doing here, which is slightly different, I think, from other services out
yes.
there. We're having 3 readers read every script. We have about a dozen, not exactly full-time readers, but our go-to list, and then we have another dozen or so that handle overflow when we get a lot of submissions at the same time. I'm sorry, I'm getting texts from my partner Steph there. I'll look at that in a moment. So we're getting three readers reading every script. They're writing full-blown coverage. Each paragraph, these are sort of the elements that they're analyzing here. They give a sense of their overall sense of the script. So this RR and consider C, those are the standard recommend, consider, pass scale. And then all the rest of these 10 here, these individual scores are on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being very bad, 5 being unbelievably good. Most things, as you can imagine, fall into the, well, from sort of talented writers with lots of experience, they're getting scores in the 3s and 4s and 5s, and then more aspiring people and people that are sort of earlier in their careers can expect to see 2s and 3s and 4s. But I didn't really want to focus on the scores so much as to just point out the sort of length and breadth of the coverage that's being provided here. In this case, the filmmaker wanted to keep the synopsis hidden. I think I definitely have one here for a project that came out this past weekend. We did a test to sort of play with our financial projections stuff that I'll tell you about in a moment. So this is probably a better example to look at coverage for this project, which I've already forgotten the name of, Me Before You. They're each writing a log line, the readers. They collaborate on this metadata, which gets used in our financial projections. They collaborate on the synopsis, a full-blown synopsis. And then each reader is writing, like I said earlier, a full paragraph on each of those 11 elements. They're giving a rating for each of these. For some of these, where it's appropriate, for example, dialogue, they're making references to the page number within the script. So to the extent they're giving critical feedback, they're saying what is not working and where, sort of examples of why. When it is working, they're giving examples where what on the page sort of jumped out at them as examples where it is working very well. And then as you're in here, let me go back up so it's a little easier to see. You can click these buttons and compare reader 1 to reader 2 to reader 3. And as you were saying earlier, this gives you a really good sense of what people's feedback is going to be if you were to send this script into the marketplace. That's sort of the rubric or the guiding sort of philosophy behind this is if you have 3 readers read a piece of material and all of them identify something that's not working, then it's probably not working. You can sort of be assured that other people are going to have the same sense of whether it's working or not on the page.
Right. The other thing I think it's important for the people that are listening to understand, this information, the script coverage, is something that investors care deeply about. So the reason it's important to have it, and the reason that it's important to have it and to include it as part of your package is that investors care about it, because investors know that they're not always in the best position. One, they don't always have time to analyze every single script they get to this level of detail, and second of all, they know that they haven't read 400 scripts or 5,000 scripts. So the investors want to have this kind of coverage, and you can purchase your coverage separately from anyone else, obviously, incorporate it into your business plan and your business package. If you want to use slated scoring methodologies and you want to have your scripts scored as part of that, then this is an option to be able to do it relatively quickly.
That text I was referring to earlier from my partner Steph, I totally misquoted the price.
So you've got,
The basic script analysis is actually
film investors want to have consistent script analysis, and so that's one of the reasons you provide this as an option. It's an easy way for filmmakers to get this and to make sure that it's sort of consistent with other scripts that are on the platform. You don't have to use it. A lot of people I've noticed have gotten funding through your site without actually doing any of the things that the analysis or the script coverage, but if it's something that's available. The next thing is I'd like you to talk about the financial analysis that you do as part of the thing.
Right. So the idea behind financial analysis is to basically do projections. We have a statistician who works with us, a data scientist. He is sort of steeped in both the entertainment business as well as sports. He's actually been working for the Yankees for the last year or so. Well after we sort of did this project, he sort of landed his dream job, which is fantastic. But it's that idea of Moneyball sort of applied to film in particular. So we're running projections for worldwide box office, worldwide television, worldwide video. And the way we do that is we take all of the attributes of the project, select comps algorithmically. So it basically looks at all those little data points. It compares this project to all 12,000 projects in the reference data set. That basically is every movie that's been released in the last 30 years. The comps are sort of weighted toward movies that have been released more recently, specifically in the last 5 years or so. And then it runs projections for North America and international box office, North America and international free and pay TV, and North American international video. These numbers are all gross, as opposed to sort of after, what the theaters take, for example. So gross revenue. And then our financial score is a ratio of adjusted gross. So think about gross, but taking the cost of marketing and distribution into account. Ratio of that to the production cost. So what we're seeing on the screen here, this is actually not correct. This movie, Me Before You, the budget was $20 million. So I'm actually glad that this is sitting here. I wanted to sort of show sort of this aspect of the site. So once you've paid for financial analysis once, you can make changes all day long. So if you want to change the production budget and see what your projections would be at 20 million instead of 10, you just change the budget and you click the button, and now it is going to, in real time, compare this project to, I think, like I said, 12,000 projects, and then it will rerun the financials as soon as it's done. So I swear this will only take another 5 or 10 seconds.
That's fine.
And we click this little button, and it comes back up, and it has totally changed all these numbers. Production budget, it turns out to be a significant factor for, as a predictor for the performance of films. We're taking a bunch of other elements into account as well. Genre is one, for the comps, the year of release is one, like I said, the running time, the MPAA rating, all of those factors go into our projections.
Which is kind of an interesting thing, because what that means is that, let's say that you run the comps for a film, and it comes out unexpectedly low, like the score is unexpectedly low. And then you say, well, you know what, I'm going to go change my MPAA rating from R to PG-13. Exactly. And all of a sudden the score leaps up, and you go, oh, I have to make this, if I do a PG film, apparently distributors are going to find me a lot more attractive, which is actually true. Because you have a lot broader market. So that's an interesting, and that's an interesting aspect of the site, the fact that you can actually, it gives you a financial model for your project that you can experiment with. Totally.
Another element that is a factor is the number of theaters that the movie is getting released on. Now, at the development stage or at the pre-production stage, most of the time you have no idea how many theaters that your movie will get released on. One of the nice things about our algorithm is that one of the things it's looking at in the comps data is the number of screens that the comparable films have been released upon, and then runs, basically creates a likelihood curve for the number of screens that your movie will be on. So in this case, this Me Before You thing, it's more similar to projects that have been released on screens in the neighborhood of 1,500. And that's why it has sort of selected, it's algorithmically selecting 1,442 screens. In practice, this movie got released on, I think, 2,700. So it's obviously not predicting, or this is not a crystal ball saying, if you make it, it'll be on 1,400 screens. You know, your distribution pattern is going to be based completely on the deal that you strike with your distributor. But one of the nice things what's happening in the background here is we're doing a sensitivity analysis for what the expected impact of releasing your film on 500 versus 1,500 versus 2,500 screens are. And in this particular case, as I sort of pointed out above, this is the budget that was on the internet, and the projections for North America are 26 million, and that movie opened from 1,400 screens, but it was released on 2,700 screens. So if you just sort of go up here, we would project that to do roughly 37 million in North America, and its opening weekend it did 18.1 or 2, I think. So projections are feeling pretty solid for this one.
That's very cool.
Some other elements that we're taking into account are the strength of the team. And so we have a sensitivity analysis that indicates what we would expect to happen with a less robust team or a more robust team. The same thing with the script. This is a good script. I can talk about the sort of the relative ranges of our scores in a moment, but what would we expect to happen if the script was significantly better or significantly worse? You can see this big drop off for script scores that are below 70. And then we do sensitivity analysis for the production budget as well, marketing budget, and then release window.
So it actually makes less money if it's actually a less profitable film if it's got a lower budget, and that's probably because P&A would be expected to fall, correct?
That would be one factor, yeah. It's complicated talking about, what would happen if you did this one thing. In the real world, so many different things happen that, all of these variables are dependent on themselves. So one thing I've learned over the last couple of years is that, these statistically driven projections are very complex. And so, you pull one string and the whole ball falls apart. So
well, and that actually brings up an interesting point, which is this financial analysis, this financial snapshot and financial model that investors can take a look at isn't a replacement for you having a budget, you doing the doing all the financial forecasts the extended financial forecasts that you're going to actually include in, which forecasts like who are to be the likely distributors or whatever.
Yeah, this is definitely not a P&L. That's the phrase that so many people use. So, when you're interacting with investors, a lot of times they'll want to see your sort of internal numbers of how the water flow goes. By that I mean, as money comes back from these various sources, whether it's the box office or a TV deal or a video deal, or even just, a guarantee with a distributor, how that money flows and what happens when and if. That's all something that this system is not designed to do. This is strictly projections for gross revenue from these three major revenue streams as sort of a gating mechanism for investors and partners on your project to sort of get a sense of, can this thing succeed? And a lot of the time, like you sort of alluded to earlier, if you're making let's assume for the sake of argument that the projections on this were half, right? If this is only going to make $25 million at the worldwide box office by projections, and you're making the $20 million version of it, the chances of the investors recouping their investment get really, really low. And that's the kind of thing you need to know as you're assembling the business plan for your project.
Right, and more importantly, the investors. One of the reasons investors like the Slated platform is because it provides a consistent, to the extent that people tend to use the tools that are provided, it provides a consistent metric by which they can judge competing projects. They can go, well, I've taken a look at this. I mean, they're going to look at the full disclosure documents. They're going to look at the private placement memorandum. They're going to look at all of the information that you present about the project, including the specificities of cast and so forth, and your marketing strategy and marketing plans. But the point is that an investor, particularly one who's writing big checks, is going to be looking at multiple projects to invest, and having these kind of thumbnail figures makes it easier for them to get a good solid grasp of your project very quickly, as opposed to having to wade through a huge quantity of data before they can even understand whether or not it's worth the hassle of wading through a large quantity of data. Like,
exactly.
Why am I even reading this document?
Right.
So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is you've kind of expanded your project. Another thing I saw, I don't know if you did it this year or last year, or late last year, but you started offering executive producer services through your platform. Can you sort of review what
Sure.
that actually means and what services that provides to filmmakers?
Absolutely. So as I talked about earlier, there's a bunch of basic services, and then we launched some analysis services. And then the thing that we wanted to do was to sort of help producers, help filmmakers access basically access money, interact with investors, and get their projects financed. A huge amount of that is happening on the site. And, producers are getting introduced to investors every day. Lots and lots of that is happening on a monthly basis. And just to back up one step, there's a lot of this sort of do-it-yourself aspect to the site that still exists, and this will always exist. You can join for free, you can list or find a project yourself, you can connect with talent and find investors and interact with sales agents and distributors. There's a bunch of educational material as well on the site. That's all free and will be. The analysis component that we launched last summer, we've talked about the script and financial analysis. And then we're using that internally, those numbers, the script and financial scores, as well as that overall package score. I don't know if I hit that too hard. If I go back to this project really quickly, just so you can sort of refresh your memory, I'll let that load in the background. We use those scores for our own internal group that is providing these executive producer services. And we basically, Slated comes aboard a project as an executive producer. We don't take individual executive producer credits. Slated just gets in association with Slated credit, a company card at the beginning of the film. But what we do is we activate our full talent network, so we help you get your project packaged up. We activate the full investor network. We're interacting with our investors all day, every day, as we're helping projects find financing. And that's, as those relationships continue to broaden and deepen, we're increasingly in a position to help filmmakers find exactly the right investors for their projects. And then, as you go through that process, we handle also all of the back office stuff associated with raising money for a project or for movies. Specifically, what I mean by that is we create a limited partnership for every film. Slated's investors become limited partners in the limited partnership. Slated itself is a general partner.
Do you create the investment docs in terms of the private placement memorandum and all?
Yep. All of that.
That's excellent. That's very cool.
Yeah, we've spent lots and lots of money getting those templates written by our lawyers, and they're really robust. The investors on our platform and the people that have interacted with those documents are thrilled, because it gives them the sense that of comfort and basically safety, I guess maybe that's the wrong word, but reading through those documents, they know that they're covered. All of the standard disclosures are included in those. So the limited partnership agreement, the PPM, the subscription agreement for the investors to become part of the limited partnership. And then there's a bunch of associated documents where, for example, the limited partnership purchases an interest in the film co that the filmmaker has put together. We've got those purchase agreements all set up. So that whole process is as turnkey as it can possibly be offline, if you will. Right. And then other things, we've got relationships with completion bond companies. We've got lots of journalists on the platform. We sort of, we want these projects to be successful, so we help promote the project to the industry. We have hundreds of sales agents and executives from distributors on the platform, so we're interacting with them. And we haven't done this yet. I want to hasten to add that this service is relatively new. So we're only 6 months into this, so there haven't been enough projects that have completed to get to this stage. But when they do, we can also help set up CAM accounts and make sure that money is flowing appropriately all the way from the theaters through to the investors and to the filmmakers themselves.
Which means, in effect, that the chances of an investor, one of the things that most filmmakers truly complain routinely about is the fact that their distributors have a tendency to forget that they have ever taken on the responsibility for marketing a film or paying the investor back. So, paying the filmmaker back for the film that they gave the distributor. So you're in a position, because you're handling the executive producer functions, and you're in a position to basically sort of look at the distributor and go, how about you just honor the contract that you signed? As
Exactly.
Because,
Yeah.
which is what you really want from an executive producer. I think that's one of the most important thing an executive producer can do, is actually say, you signed a contract and I expect you to honor it.
Exactly.
You know? Cool. And so can you explain to me how the fees work? So are there any upfront costs for once people submit their project to you? Is there an upfront cost, or do you only take on projects if you like them?
We only take on projects if we like them. We only get paid if the movie goes into production. Our fee is, it's a range. It's based on the size of the budget. It's somewhere between 2 and 5% of the budget. And then we take a piece of the back end on the investor side at this point. We might make an adjustment to that as we go forward, but that assuming we bring some other services to bear. But right now, our back end participation is on the investor side, and it's only after the investors have recouped their basically 120%. So 100% recoupment plus a 20% preferred return. And not every project qualifies. I just want to sort of hasten to add that those sort of threshold script and financial and package scores that we look for are the first step. But there's a bunch of other factors on this page. On this page on the site, you can sort of take your time to sort of look through these and other questions in our help desk. But we're looking at lots of different aspects of the project. Not least, is the project ready to be seen by investors? Right. And one thing that we see often, a mistake as far as we're concerned, is trying to approach investors before a project is ready for investors to pay attention to it. Right. It's happened to us where we've gotten excited about working with filmmakers on a project, and they have a lot of the stuff in place. For example, they have their budget. They have a great production plan. They know exactly what they want to do, but they don't have cast, for example. A lot of investors are still looking sort of the old school way of how you get films financed. And if you have a producer and a director, but you don't have any cast attached, I know that's that classic chicken and the egg thing of you can't get financing without you're having your actors in place, but can't get actors to commit until you have financing. That's unfortunately still the place that the business is in. So we can only be as successful helping you raise money for your project if your project is sort of far enough along for people to pay attention to it. There's a little bit, still all over the place, but my point is that we're looking at the status of the team, whether you have a professionally produced budget, whether the size of the budget is appropriate for the project. Do you have financing in place? That's not required for us to get involved, but that's a helpful sort of sense of momentum. Is something that we can use when we're talking to Slated's investors. The terms of the deal, if you have equity in place already, sometimes those deal terms are bad for follow-on equity players. So we need to know the sense of that. Just the marketability of the project, whether how much material you've sort of put together as a filmmaker to get people interested, whether it's the poster or a sort of director's vision like that one I showed you for Cruise. And then finally, another thing is, just how engaged are the filmmakers with working with us. We want to work with people who see Slated as a long-term partnership, both for this project and for future ones. So all of those are elements that we look for when we're considering whether to get involved with the project for our executive producer services.
That is very cool. So that is actually a very cool thing, actually.
Thank you.
So, wow. So do you have anything else that you sort of wanted to cover? Because I think we should start.
I'm sorry, by the way, to sort of make this a Slated commercial. I didn't intend to do that, but as we were getting into the sort of the specifics of what project profiles look like and what our services are, I felt like it would be helpful to sort of see specific pages on the site. I'll stop sharing my screen for now and then answer any questions, or we can keep going forward.
Well, let's keep going forward. You can keep it up. I want to be like, this is people who are attending this particular event are specifically attending because they want to learn more about Slated. So it's kind of completely appropriate. It's not like you're
commercial. It is.
Yeah, it is a commercial. Well, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with people talking about a platform they've built to fund films that actually funds films and talking about how it funds films. I don't know what else we'd be talking about. I mean, we could think about it, and it's not like, and I've done a million other events about a variety of different solutions, but so this is not like what's important is that people get the information about slated.com. I really like the platform, and I've liked it for a long time, specifically because I like there's an arbitrariness that I don't like to the film industry. I come from a tech background, and I've worked in tech for many years, and everything's very transparent. Everything in tech stuff tends to be very transparent, and if things aren't transparent, people get irritable, right? Like,
yeah.
And one of the things that Slated does, I think, is brings that kind of transparency. Everything's very transparent. It's like, it's not a question, this is the project, this is where it is. Yes, there's a lot of investors. Yes, there's a lot of projects. Yes, there's a lot of, so it's a very transparent platform for people to be able to find who they're supposed to be working with. Not every investor is meant for every project. Not every project is meant for every investor. Not every team should be working on every project. It's, and
not every script is ready to go. I mean, all of those elements go into what Slated's philosophy is.
Right. And also it's ultimately hopeful, because it's not the case that that's the other thing that I kind of like about the tech industry, is the tech industry kind of understands the concept of a prototype, and they understand the concept of it starts at the beginning and it grows better. Like it's the concept of an evolution. And when the Slated has always allowed people to post their project at any, has always allowed people to post their projects and add data to it so it gets better over time, which is what is supposed to happen. And I think that there is a tremendous kind of a throwback to, I think, working with the studios. There's a tremendous push on a lot of filmmakers to pretend that their projects spring perfect from their heads at the first moment. And I just think that's crazy. And also they tend to make people pretty dogmatic about their projects. And you go, this thing, like, and I've worked with filmmakers, I've said, your project you've got an R-rated project here. And you understand that has an impact to who you can sell the project to. And the R-rated elements that you're adding don't seem to me to be like mission critical to the story. And yet, so why have you made the decision to make this an R-rated project?
Right.
And the thing is, you can have that kind of a discussion if you can say, see, this is what happens to your revenues if you change this parameter.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that, so that kind of thing I find that kind of thing very satisfying.
Here's another thing that, since we're talking about what happens to your project if you change this certain thing. So I'm going to add, let's say I add Amy Adams here, for example. Who has a fantastically high score as the lead. I'm not even going to take Amelia Clark. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I'm adding Amy Adams. You can see that the team score just jumped up. And if I click that button, it would rerun the financials on the fly. So the point is that you can simulate teams.
Oh, that's amazing.
For a producer, right? So you can say, what happens if if we change the director, or change, instead of Amelia Clark, we add Amy Adams. Those kinds of things are super helpful when you're trying to figure out what's best for your project.
That is amazing. That is incredibly, incredibly cool. So let me go ahead. We do have sort of a lot of, we have a lot of people sort of checking in. And I think I want to go ahead and ask some of I'm just going to go through the questions as they are in the order they came in. So one question is, what percentage of films get funded who don't pay Slated for script analysis? Do you have to pay for the script analysis for your site for the Slated to actually achieve funding? And I think you've already mentioned that films get funded on Slated all the time that don't pay for the script analysis. It's just the case that the only way that you can actually provide scoring at all is if you can control the script analysis, and if you can control the financial modeling, because you have to be able to compare apples to apples.
Well, that's certainly true for the script score and the financial score. The team score gets assigned to the project automatically and for free. So you can definitely indicate the strength of the team that's involved in your project for free. You don't have to pay anything for that. And as I said earlier, there's lots and lots of projects that have gotten funded without script and financial analysis. We don't have internal numbers. I wish I had an easy sort of slam dunk answer for you to sort of say the number of projects that have that have completed funding on the site without Slated's involvement. But because we're not involved, we don't have ways to track that. What I do know is that films listed on Slated received last year in 2015 received production financing of over $500 million from all sources. That's not just from Slated's investors, but all of those movies got introductions to Slated investors as well. All of the investment activity happens offline, and so as our executive producer services sort of comes to maturity, as we start to have more and more projects go through that process, we'll be able to sort of point to movies that we brought funding to, and that's already happened for a couple that I can't talk about yet, but it's certainly early days for our executive producer services, and I think by the end of the summer we'll be able to point to a couple of movies that have received financing, and as well as some other exciting things that are coming down the pike.
Very cool. So that makes perfect sense. So another question we have is, I've been asked by another producer to help find funding for a feature film that has partial funding and talent attached. Is it okay to post it? Is it okay on Slated for me to pitch this project as long as I have approval from the original producer? So I think they're asking if somebody happens to be not a producer on a project, are they allowed to post a project, or do you have to be the producer if you're going to post the project?
The short answer is, let's leave the title aside. You need to be part of the project in order to list it. One of the things you are sort of attest to as you start to create a project profile is that this is your project. We use that term slightly loosely. I don't want to undermine that at all. But if you're an assistant to somebody, for example, and your job is to create a project on Slated, that's perfectly fine. If you're somehow involved in pushing a project forward at the development stage, that's perfectly fine as well. I would say that if you're sort of tangentially related, let's say you're rendering services, just picking a role at random. If you're a composer doing music for a film and the project doesn't have a profile on Slated, technically I guess you could create a project profile, but the minute the producer, we require, in order to sort of show the people who are attached to the project, everybody has to verify their involvement. This project, as I said earlier, is a test, so I just did the verify later option, but I could click a button here and it would ask me to verify that Amelia Clark is involved. The minute you start to do that, the minute you start to build out your project profile, people are going to get notified that you're doing that, and if you're not part of the production team, or if you don't have authority to do that, you're going to run into trouble with them.
You're going to run into, it's going to start being a question, it's going to start turning into a legal hassle, which yeah. I think we need to take a moment to say that if you're a finder, now there are a bunch of people there, and I will not say mean things about them generally speaking, but there are people who call themselves finders who basically sort of gather up all kinds of films projects and then go around and sort of go around town and basically pitch them to all kinds of people. I don't suspect that Slated.com would necessarily be the best place for a finder to randomly pitch people on projects, because they don't have sole responsibility for funding the project. It's like,
yeah, the way I think about that is projects it's incredibly difficult to raise money for movies. The best way to do that is to get the producers or the filmmakers, I don't just mean the producer role, but everybody, I'll just use these elements here. If you can get everybody who's actively involved in pushing a project forward to participate in the fundraising process, that's what's going to get your film financed. The investors want to know that the producer is completely behind a project and is going to move heaven and earth to get it made, that the director knows exactly what kind of movie she wants to make and knows exactly, they're not looking for a shot-by-shot lookbook necessarily, but knowing what her vision for the film is very important. I don't think investors have the expectations that they're going to speak to the lead actors, for example, but to the extent they're willing to participate in promoting the film even before it gets going, it's super helpful. That project I showed at the beginning of the call, Cruise, that director's video that I sort of let run for a moment, Emily Ratajkowski is chatting to the camera, talking to Slated investors about how excited she is to be involved in the movie. Those kinds of things are what help get the film funded in the first place. And so if you're a finder and putting together a portfolio of films and interacting with investors to get them made, more power to you. I just to your point, I think that if you're doing that without the support of the producers, it's just not going to be successful. And why would you sort of dig a hole and have to climb out of it rather than starting from a place where everybody is participating in the process?
Right, and I think it's important to realize that people don't have the right to misrepresent projects and so forth, or their position.
Well, that's certainly true, right? I think I tend to assume that people. This is maybe a insight into my worldview. I tend to think that people act on the up and up. So yeah, to say nothing of people who don't have the right to do that, but we definitely don't support that in any way.
Which is another reason the platform is good, because when you list a project and you start adding people, they are going to find out about what's being done. So it won't be the case of your involvement in a project can be misrepresented, because it's like if my name's listed there, it's going to request that you verify me.
Exactly, and that applies to the actors as well. Confirming that actors are involved in a project, there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. You can have the actor themselves can sort of click. When you click verify, one of three things can happen. Either the system sends an email to the person and they click a button in the email, or for actors in particular, their representatives can be sent that email and they can verify it. And then we also allow uploading LOIs. And the point there is not so much that to illustrate the actor verification process, but that every attachment on a project on Slated needs to be verified in order to be visible to the public. So it's really not in anyone's interest to create a dummy project that no one can see. So it's really it's not an actual problem, but I'm glad we talked about it so we can talk about those tools.
No, but I think it's actually an important thing to and I think it is the case that every smart investor invests in a team. It's the team that makes a project happen. Right. It's always people that make a project happen. It's not just the parameters of the content, but it is the people that put together the plan and put their back into making things come off as advertised.
Totally.
So here's another question. I think somebody's asking, I think we've covered this. You don't actually have to have script analysis or financial analysis in order to use a platform. Most of the features are free. The scoring tool and the executive production functions, if people want to get involved with them, then they have to do the script analysis and financial analysis, because in order to get scored, you have to be able to have a level playing field where you can't just be, it has to be people that have looked at. It has to be a consistency, otherwise the scores are meaningless. Right. So if people actually go onto the site, they can take a look at all of the tools that they can, in terms of building teams and so forth, and adding their project and adding their videos and stuff. And investors will be able to see their project. They'll be able to reach out to investors through the platform. Is that correct? Or can they will. Based upon the quality of the team, they'll be able to reach investors that are in line with the quality of the team that they currently have attached. If there's nobody attached to the project, then they're not going to be able to reach very many people, because at the moment they would just be pestering investors when they don't have much to show for what they plan to do. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, yes. That's one element of it. Another element of it is based on people that you know. So if you think about just the normal process of interacting with people that you don't know, I hate the word spam in this context, but blasting updates to the entire membership about your project is not going to be all that useful. People will just treat it as noise. But those sharing tools that are built into each project page, this team reach idea shows how many members on Slated you can reach through your team. This is based on the people that are attached. So you can send updates to all of these people. And in this case, I'm actually not sure what this is attached to. It might be my name, because to do a test, you have to have at least one real person attached. So in this case, my team reach just with one person is 639 people, 62 of whom are investors who control or represent up to $72 million in production financing.
Right, and people are allowed to, if you have investors, who are tracking your project, you can reach out to those investors and say, hey, if you have questions about your project, if you have questions about my project, please let me know and I'll be glad to answer them for you.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think, let's see, if I just go to a film page here, I'll just show you what, I think I have investor status, so you'll be able to see an example of this where I can reach out to a project. Let's do it here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure I'm not an admin on this project. Let's see. It's the danger of live demos. I do not, okay, good. So I can see this button right here.
Mm-hmm.
As an investor, I can click the button and message the filmmakers. I can tell them, I can just, hey, I like the cut of your jib or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you send that and it goes to them through the Slated platform. I can also share, as an investor, I can share this with people on Slated, off of Slated. So this is something that you can sort of help. This helps your network help you get the word out about your project.
Right, and if you see an investor following you, with like tracking your project, you're welcome to reach out to them. It's totally legitimate for you to reach out and say, if you have any questions and you'd like me to answer them, please let me know. Thanks for following my project. And then,
exactly.
And if you get financial stuff done, or if you add, you have like a new pitch deck or something like that, you can make it available through the platform as well.
Exactly. One other element, by the way, I think we talked about this, but you don't, if you pay for script and financial analysis, you don't have to make those visible to anybody. Mm-hmm. So if you have your visibility settings set to no, for lack of a better word, and as an investor, I'm interested in this project, I can just click on the script or financial. Oh, here's an example right here where they don't have their coverage visible. I can request access, and clicking this button is going to bring up this little modal, and it says right there, I'm interested in learning more about your project. Please let me have access. So these are the ways that investors can reach out to you as the filmmaker to see what's up with your project. And then in the other direction, you can just, there's ways to use, there's lots of different tools on the site that allow you to sort of reach out to people and sort of use your existing relationships to connect your way to people who can help finance your film.
That's cool. So in other words, I can actually go through and take a look at, if I need to find a line producer, I can go find a highly scored line producer that's done projects in the similar budget to mine. And I can reach out to them and say, I'm looking for a line producer for this project. Is it something you might be interested in?
Exactly.
Cool. And if I've happened to done the script scoring and financial models, he too can review that information, which will let him know how far the project is before he's thinking about coming on board.
Yeah, exactly.
So if I have another question we have is, how many producers can you list? You can have as many producers as you want listed on a project. Is that true? That's
right.
And all of those producers will add to your score. So if I'm working on
not okay. On that last part, no. So the way the team score works is it looks at the score. It takes the highest scoring producer, the highest scoring lead actor, the highest scoring writer if there's more than one, the highest scoring director if there's more than one.
And averages that.
It's not so much an average; it's just elements within the team score. I'll go back, so I'll just have it a little visual thing here. And so I just clicked the little button, the little info button, and it talks about how the team score works here. Okay, this is the video that we produced. But so again, the highest scoring lead actor, the highest scoring producer, the highest scoring director, writer. If you have a distribution already in place, it'll take the score of the distribution company. If you don't, but you have a sales agent, it'll take the sales agent score. Great. So in this case, I think it's distributed by Warner Brothers, so it takes this 95.
Which is good. Good, 95 is a good number.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
If we were to have a number, that would be a good one to have. I think the question I get most commonly, I've been running events for film funding since 2009, and at this point, I'm running at least one a week. And the question I get most routinely, like every single time I have a meeting, is how do I find investors? And I always say the same thing. I always say, well, the easiest way I know of is to go on to slated.com because it's an equity investment an equity investor platform. And the reason that I've been saying that all of this time is because it's actually a site that's an equity investor platform. So I can't think of a more direct way. I mean, it's like, it's all it does. This is one thing. So it's not that you can't find investors a whole bunch of other ways. If you don't know anything about investors or or you're afraid to pitch them, I recommend that you check out a book called The Millionaire Mind. You'll be shocked.
Well, that's a good book, yeah.
It's a great book. You'd be shocked at how many people, investors, most of the time, some characteristics of investors will make you feel more comfortable. Most of the time, they've previously owned a business of their own, or been a founder, or co-founder of another business, or sometimes they've managed a business very successfully. Frequently, they live below their means. They choose to invest in things like film or in businesses instead of investing in the stock market because they like to have a direct impact on the businesses that they support. They want to know that there's a real business there. They're not just playing a numbers game. They actually like to build things.
On that note, if you don't mind me chiming in, that's something that a version of that, the film version of that, is something that we learned, or we learned is the wrong word, that we take into account every single day as we're interacting with Slated's investor community. One of the common denominators is that investing in film is not a financial decision as much as it is sort of an emotional decision. And by that I mean, if all they were interested in doing was making money, they wouldn't put it into films. As a group, it's not the most solid investment. And I don't mean to be glib about that, just that if all you wanted to do was make money, you would put your money in an index fund or whatever, right? That there are more tried and true ways to get return on your investment. However, there's something really special about the entertainment business and movies in particular. And film investors want to feel like a hero. They want to feel like they are helping create something. A lot of times they don't have the skill set to write or to direct or act or produce, but what they do have is money, and being able to put that into a project that they get excited about creatively or emotionally is really important. So forgetting that aspect of it, forgetting the creative aspect, and leaving aside the message of a given film. I think it's easy if you have a film that is sort of message oriented. It's easy to get sucked into just talking about the message. But beyond that, people love to, or these particular people, film investors, people who already have an interest in doing that, they're looking for projects that will sort of fulfill that emotional side of them. And so forgetting that is, I think, a big mistake. And focusing strictly on the financials is a mistake. You can't not address it. You have to have a plan. You have to be able to execute that plan. But talking about the creative in a compelling way is a really important part of that process. The idea of making independent film into an actual asset class, by which he means not unlike putting your money into whatever tech stocks, creating or making investing in films as transparent and as repeatable and as reliable as that is something that he wants to do. So making independent film an asset class is sort of part of the mission for Slated over the next 10 years. I think that's a very smart thing. I work on the tech side. I know a lot of people that have developed apps, and I've routinely found myself looking at the film investment community and thinking, God, I come from the app community where we do soup to nuts. Our objective is to figure out not just how the film is how the app is going to be created, but how it's going to be marketed, how the people are going to be acquired, how it's going to grow over time. We think in terms of a larger picture, and so many filmmakers really don't think in terms of a full career. They don't think in terms of gathering up their customers from project to project. It's very much it is a very smash and grab concept of, well, I'm going to do this one film and then I'm going to move on to something else. Not exactly a career building strategy. It isn't. And also they don't think in terms of teams a lot of times, So the other thing is, I think we may have gotten, we did get more questions. I apologize, but they're good ones. So you like this one. So another question we have, I apologize. There are so many. Someone says, if we're seeking a script writer because what they have is a little bit rough, and we need to get more experienced producers to work with us as well. Is it too premature for us to list our project on Slated, or is this a good time for us to post the project and start reaching out to people? I think it sort of depends on the situation, but I guess my gut reaction is it's never too early to list a project on Slated. Earlier in the conversation, I guess I came up with a scenario where it is a little too early. But if you're working on an early draft of the script, and part of what you're doing is looking for a producer who can help you develop that script, then no. And by the way, you're listing your project on Slated doesn't mean necessarily that you're making it public or visible to everybody. I think having a profile for a project is a useful tool, especially since it's free, and being able to point people to sort of a home base for that project during the development phase can be really helpful. And networking your way within Slated to the producers who are there, writers and directors to a certain degree too, although having been a lit agent and a lit manager previously, I know you probably get more traction speaking to reps directly than trying to network directly to a writer, at least in terms of good outcomes for your project. It's probably a better tactic. But look, I know not so much firsthand from making films myself, but being in and around this business, hustle is important. So, taking as many different routes to get to where you need to go is definitely part of the process.
Definitely. And also, what is it? William Goldman says, no one knows anything, but I think your answer is very good. Someone said, can you talk about how ratings are scored on members? I notice people with significant credit sometimes get low scores. Is that based on, what's that based on? And is there a way if you've got a really low score, is there a way that you can figure out what needs to change so that your score improves?
So let's start by saying that the scores are based on data provided by a company called the company is now called Gracenote. They're the same company that provide metadata to iTunes. They've got it's a huge business that provides music and film and TV data to Time Warner and Comcast and iTunes, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where our data comes from. For the scores, the people's scores are based on their film track record in terms of box office, and then their film and TV. And I think actually it includes like Tony Awards as well, like non-film and TV, but not a lot of that. Anyway, it also includes their award nominations and wins over time. So their lifetime box office, lifetime awards, and lifetime award nominations and wins, that's where it starts. If it's been a while since somebody has performed a certain role, their scores in a particular area will diminish. It's not a straight line, but if your primary credit was a silly example, I guess, but was Titanic, that was a huge success at the time. But if you haven't done anything since then, the value of that to your score will definitely be lower than it is now than if, for example, you were in Captain America 3 or whatever. Mm-hmm. The reason to mention the base or the Gracenote studio system element of where our data comes from is you can also add your own credits to your profile that are not already represented there, but those don't count to your score. The score is really driven by the data that we're getting from our data provider. So to the extent something is not listed on your credits, we basically sort of facilitate a conversation between you and studio system that they're sort of basically Gracenote's Gracenote's sort of customer service team there, so you can talk to them about your credits. And one final thing to note is that TV credits themselves, so if you're an executive producer on Breaking Bad or whatever, that's not going to count toward your score in and of itself. The award nominations and wins you got for being on that show or doing whatever you did on that show will count, but not the fact that you did the job itself. That will change. We're working on adding TV to our scoring system throughout this year, but it's not like that's coming out before the 4th of July or something. That's a little bit down the road, but not that far.
That's perfect. So that makes perfect sense. Basically, if you've got an older credit, even if it's a really great credit, it's going to atrophy over time. You have investors who who have specific interest in all kinds of things, including things like have a specific interest in investing in horror, specific interest in faith-based, specific interest in investing in documentaries or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. So, that's right. And also investors who have specific investment triggers, like they are looking specifically for projects that can be shot in Canada, for example.
Oh, cool.
Or Chinese, material that would work for Chinese content. I mean, there's lots and lots of investors on the site, and they all have different things that they're looking for. It's actually fairly rare that given investor says, "Oh, just send me something good." Like most of them have a. I mean, they'll say that, but they also say, "Yeah," except they don't really like comedies or horror or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, being able to.
So you can read the investor profile as well, which will give
Yeah.
you information on what the kinds of things they're interested in.
Yep.
Then I think the last question is, can one use Slated to fund a slate of films? In other words, if you want to fund more than one film at a time.
So yeah, you can, leaving our executive
Mm-hmm.
producer services aside for a moment,
Mm-hmm.
certainly allowing investors to invest in a slate of films to spread their risk or to take a portfolio investment strategy. That's certainly something that you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Our services and the limited partnerships that we set up are, I guess, in theory, could invest in a slate, but we're not really set up for that. And that would be sort of an outlier situation that we would have to handle sort of on a case-by-case basis.
That sounds perfect. If people have any questions, you actually have a very well-developed technical support team actually on slated.com. So people can reach out to me, but you also provide support, correct?
Yep, that's right. There isn't live support like live chat necessarily, but there's very robust help tools. So anybody who's having issues, whether it's understanding what we're doing or after you've signed up, sort of understanding what to do next, just reach out. People are paying attention to that all the time. And usually, I think the response time is within 3 or 4 hours during the day, and even sometimes late at night.
Because who sleeps?
So
yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, who needs sleep?
I slept that one time. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I just can't thank you enough. I really enjoyed it.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Nancy, and thanks for everybody who participated. I really appreciate you being here.
Great. I hope you have a great night, man.
Thanks, you too.